gee, we were in a situation where we were playing in the national semifinal game. We were playing a team called, Virginia, which had a great player. Her name was Dawn Staley. Dawn had gone on to play in 3 Olympics. She was a 3-time All-American. She carried the U.S. flag in Greece when we were at the Olympics. She's just a phenomenal player. Well, it was a 1-point game. We were winning by 1, and there was 0.7 seconds left on the clock. And she was going to get the ball, and I put in Angela, who had not been in that game at all, and for 0.7 seconds, she guarded this Dawn Staley, because that was what she was good at, was playing defense, and we went on to win a national championship. Now, someone could say, well, I only played 0.7 seconds, but that was the 0.7 second to determine the outcome of the game. So I feel like I honestly do value the contributions of everyone on the team, and it's not always, contributions are not always in a stat sheet. You don't always, just because someone scored a lot of points. We have had players that are tremendous talents who are absolutely not leaders and not cohesive. They did not help the cohesion of our team, and in fact we were better when they didn't play. So I think the getting everyone on the same page, and this particular team this past year, if anyone saw it, maybe just tell me if you watched our team play at all this year, so you maybe watched a little bit. So this particular team, there were 7 players who played basically all the minutes, and there were 7 players who didn't play at all. And that kind of team could be, you could have the 7 players, but it was interesting when I asked them, when we do rooming assignments, I assign the roommates through the year, and I mix everyone around, and then when it comes to the tournament, for the Pac-10 tournament and the NCAA tournament, I let them pick a roommate. One for the Pac-10, one for the first round of the NCAA, one for the second round of the NCAA. And I let them, rank, if you want, your first 3 or first 5, and I give it usually to the upperclassmen. The seniors will get their first choice. And it was interesting that it wasn't these 7 wanting each other. It was everyone kind of, there wasn't like this group and that group. And I think that really pointed to the strong leadership on our team with our seniors, that everyone wanted our seniors to go out on a high note. Everyone was committed to, the star players were good people, and they brought everyone into the circle, which we will always stand in a circle before every practice. Before games, we join hands in a circle, and that everyone is very important as part of that circle. And kind of in a business sense, I think that if I were the CEO, or I'm the CEO of our basketball program, but I always try to make sure that even going into our building, is recognizing the woman that cleans our building. Speaking with her every day and it's, really making sure that everyone, and my assistant coaches are great at this. We get gear, little like T-shirts, stuff and everything, and spreading that gear around to everyone so that people are supportive of your program and the job you do.
In every team, there's always going to be conflict. How do you deal with conflict between team members?
Let's see. We haven't had a lot of it. We haven't had a lot of. I think that part of it is framing for your team, framing for the people that you're working with, what the goal is. And if we in this room are on the same team and we want to accomplish, we have to agree on similar goals, and we have to look at our behavior. Is that behavior that is going to help us accomplish our goal? Our goal was to win a national championship. And so if you're upset with someone else on your team, you have to, work that out. And, really this year, I can't think of I can't think of an incident where it was a lot of conflict. And the same thing with the Olympic team. When I'm we're traveling all over the world, I never had to pull someone in and say, hey, we need to talk about this. Everyone knew it was about winning a gold medal. And, I think that, I think that that's a communication, the importance of the communication from whether it's your head coach or, leaders or team leaders. And it's everyone really saying, all right, I'm willing to sacrifice for this because we want this so badly. And then there's always the 6 o'clock in the morning practices that they help too. We didn't have to have any this year.
They're so tired, there's no conflict, right?
Right. Let's see, I'm trying to think of, there are some times where you do have players on your team who, I would just say, the conflict is maybe they're not mature enough. They don't understand kind of the big picture. They don't get it. And it, to me, is that we sacrifice for each other, that we're unselfish, and that we work really hard for each other. And a lot of it is about the caring that you have for the person next to you, that you don't want to let them down, and to develop this culture of, whether it's a business, whether it's a lab, this culture of I'm not going to let my teammate down. I will do what it takes, and I will work extra so that we experience kind of the highs together, because it is very, very competitive. I'm sure that every field that each of you are in is extremely competitive, and to figure out, well, how do I get to the next level, and we're trying to do that as a team.
Title IX clearly changed the landscape. Could you very briefly, probably most people are aware of it, but I'm guessing not everybody is, could you just very briefly summarize what Title IX was, and then talk about what needed to happen in addition to Title IX to get women's sports to where they are today?
Well, I grew up, again, I grew up in the 60s, the 70s, when girls' sports did not exist. Now, we have a basketball camp so I kind of run a business in addition to, coaching. During the summer, we've had 1,800 young girls, 8 to 18, come to basketball camp. And we have a room like this over in the athletic department. There were 58-year-olds sitting in the room. And I told them, I never played basketball when I was your age. They did not have teams. There was no such thing as, biddy ball. There's no such thing as junior high basketball. Only the boys played. And, I went on about how there were no scholarships for girls, no teams to play on. My college team, when I went, I paid my own way. I waitressed to pay for going to school. And 8-year-olds were just in amazement. And one little 8-year-old raises her hand and says, "Why was it like that?" And I was like, how do I explain this? So, just like any of your teachers, what do they say? They say, well, can anyone else answer that question? And so another little 8-year-old raises her hand real quick, and she goes, sexism, like that. And it was like, whoa, 8 years old. And, it was very painful for me as a young girl. I loved to play. And I would I'd save my allowance, I went out and got a good basketball, and I would go and, the time I was 10 years old, 11, 12, play with the boys. And let's say they had an odd number, I'm like, Tara, you're out. And I'm like, okay, that's my ball. If you want to play with that nice ball, I'm playing. It's like, this little guy is out because I'm better than him, So as I got older, though, it became really, there was a 7th grade boys team, 8th grade boys team, freshman boys team. So I thought, how am I going to get to the games? I was at a university school. My parents lived 20 miles away. So I tried out to be the mascot. So I was a bear. Imagine that. At Stanford, a bear. So, and I would take the head off and watch the game, and I got fired in the middle of the season because I wasn't leading the cheers. I was watching the game. So, but it was really painful as a young person not to have the opportunity to play. So I went out and I bought a 10-speed bike, and my parents lived in Niagara Falls, right outside of Buffalo. I was the only person in the whole city that had a 10-speed bike. People would yell out the window at me, hey, get a horse. I'm like, get a life. It was crazy, but that was my outlet, riding my bicycle. And I just said, I'm too old for basketball. I was 15, I'm not going to play again, but it was really painful. And then along comes Title IX in 1972 that basically is a law that was actually Richard Nixon signed, that basically said that universities and anyone that took federal money had to include women in their sports programs. That's kind of the gist of it. it's more to it. And the powers to be fought it because on college campuses, you as a student would pay, at most schools, you would pay a university fee, a couple $100. It all went to the boys. And I'm like, this isn't right. So you could have a whole program on just Title IX, but Title IX is something that, if in your life, can you ever look and say, one thing totally changed the path of my life? Well, that did for me. Because now all of a sudden, there are jobs for women coaching basketball. My college coach, I went to Indiana, was a graduate student. She's a wonderful woman. She was 25 years old. She had kinesiology, exercise physiology, and then she coached us on the side. I have a full-time position with a video coordinator, 3 full-time assistants, director of basketball. I mean, there's 7 or 8 people in my office alone, which is always the way it's been for men. So this one thing has shaped basketball in the United States and women's sports as much as anything.
Was there more? Do you think that the women's movement, for example, which of course they're tied together because Title IX was a product of that, a product of the civil rights movement as well as the women's movement. But
I definitely think they did go a little hand in hand. And I think that some of the obviously parents were really important, but I think that I think the dads of daughters really were a lot of times the heroes of the story, in that they would, they'd have a son, and when I call it the hot dogs and steak. When I would sit down at the dinner table, my mom and dad, I have one brother, and my mom and dad would serve hot dogs to everybody, all right, or steak to everybody, not hot dogs to the girls and steak for the boys. That wasn't how it worked. But I look at it where, and a lot of times in sports, it was even worse than that. I mean, but now, and we still have a long way to go in Title IX, 1972. What's the math on that? How many years ago was that? Yeah, it was a ways back, and we still have a long way to go, because when people have something, they are slow to give it up. If you're used to having, as a football coach, if you're used to having unlimited scholarships, all of a sudden having 120, now it's down to 85. That was like, oh no, we can't survive on that. We get used to a certain thing, and then change is really hard. But one of the things I think with Stanford is that they recognized that early on. They said, we're going to work hard to have women's sports and support women's sports, and they are at Stanford. How many of you ever participated in college athletics at a university? All right, so a lot of people at some level. How many people play sports? Just that's part of your life. You do something. All right. I know a hockey player right here. But you recognize how important sports are, and you gain certain things from that activity, whether it's playing pickup at the gym, or whether it's rock climbing, or whatever it is. It's a real important part of our lives, and it keeps us in balance. So,
I'm going to ask one last question and then turn it over to the floor. As you think back about this change, this enormous sea change that happened in women's sports, and think about, and as you say, we're not fully there yet, but compared to where we were